Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 5 of Visions of Tomorrow, the review series for Gran Turismo's selection of Vision GT concept cars, some of which are a little bit more outlandish than others, and this one is an example of that. It's the Alpine Vision GT. Now there are two versions of this model. There's the base model, as it were, which is this one here, and there's also a race mode which has a rear wing and is a slightly more tighter and taut race version of that car. Now the specs are pretty much exactly the same, funnily enough. The race version just has a slightly higher PP. And it's a very interesting little car. It's powered by a 4.5 litre mid-mounted engine which powers the rear wheels, and it produces a spec which is okay. 443 horsepower and a pretty decent 427 pound-feet of torque. But the interesting thing about that engine is the revs. It produces peak power at only around 5,000 RPM and peak torque at around 2. You would expect, or I would have at least, that this car would be quite a rev-happy engine which needs to be worked hard to get the best out of it, kind of like a VTEC. But actually no, it produces its power very low range, which means it's a relatively lazy engine. Easy to get the power out of it, and attainable torque and power out of even low speed corners. So that's a good start. It also only weighs 900 kilos, which is lighter than a lot of the other Vision GTs, putting it on par with a Le Mans prototype. So that's also pretty good. It puts out 492 horsepower per tonne, which is pretty decent considering it doesn't have a huge amount of power to work with. And the PP is possibly a little bit too high, but not as ridiculously high as some others, at 587 and 599 incidentally on the race version. But the big question is, as with all of these Vision GT cars, for those who haven't won the car, or for those who haven't owned it or bought it already, is it worth the price? Because this is, alongside the race model, 1 million credits, as many of the VGTs are. So is it actually worth that money? Because the majority of what you're paying for is just the idea of the car rather than what it can actually do in most cases. Well, to be brutally honest, from a performance point of view, it's not worth 1 million credits. That's just a simple, unarguable fact. It does around 180, 190 miles per hour. The acceleration is decent enough. The handling is very good, but not necessarily the best of its PP range. And the amount of tracks where it will actually win are pretty restrictive, to be honest. It's one of those cars which is a little bit too niched for its own good. Kind of like the Red Bull Junior, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if you're just looking for a nice car to drive, because it certainly is that. It's very fun to drive. It has a detailed interior, unlike most of the VGTs. It looks great, and it sounds great. So, from the point of view of it being a nice car, well, yeah, it definitely is. But if you're looking for a car which will actually serve you well on the track and will win races, and be in effect worth that 1 million credits in hard facts and spec, then it just doesn't do that. Now, as we said, with most of the VGTs you're paying for the exclusivity and for the idea of the machine rather than for what it can actually do, and from that point of view it's not a bad car. It's an exciting return of the French sports car company, which made, back in the day, successful road racing and rally racing models. And it's cool. It injects some life back into the company's lineup on Gran Turismo, because the cars that they have aren't bad, but funnily enough, like this one, they're a little bit too over-niched. They're good for what they do, but what they do doesn't have many rivals. So it's not so much that they're bad cars, it's just there are very few, well, just that, rivals to take them on, so they kind of race almost on their own. But overall, is it worth 1 million credits? Well, from a performance point of view, as I said, no. If, however, you haven't bought it yet, you've got some spare money perhaps, and you're looking for something different that you haven't bought yet, maybe just something to cruise with or to have fun in, then I would recommend this model. And of the two, I would actually recommend this version more than the race model, because the race model has an even higher PP and really isn't justified in doing so. But that's it overall for this review, and as I said last week, I'll also remind you guys again, maybe you didn't see last week's episode featuring the Tomahawk, etc., but on the official Facebook page of HSG, which is facebook.com/HammerStudiosOfficial, you can find 7 teasers as to what the daily reviews will be for the coming week. Now, I haven't posted them yet, but if you check out Facebook, within probably half an hour of me posting this video, they will be up, and you can perhaps try and work out what next week's videos will be. So if that interests you, be sure to check that out. And as always, thanks for watching.